Hello everyone, Claire Fox here, Brexit Party MEP for the North West of England. I'm here with June Mummery and Matthew Patton, my fellow MEPs from the Brexit Party, and we're almost at the end of our time here in the European Parliament. And I thought it was a good idea to kind of have some chats with some of my fellow MEPs, because on the one hand we're all, I think, very proud that we have contributed to the historic decision, or rather the historic realising of the decision that the British people took many years ago now to leave the European Union, and we've helped, I think, make that a reality. But we also were going to go back to the UK after the 31st of January, and there's things to do there. So I thought it was a chance to catch up. So I'm going to just ask you straight away, the Brexit Party didn't get anywhere in the general election. The Conservative Party won very much with the loaned votes of Leavers. But actually it's an opportunity, I think, regardless of one's politics or one's party affiliations, to really think about the way that the UK needs to be transformed. Because Brexit's not just about leaving the EU, it also has to have some dividends, I think. And I wanted to say, or ask you, start with you, June. I'm worried about some of the Northern Heartlands, the coastal communities, that actually they feel neglected, they want some regeneration. Your experience of coastal communities, what do you reckon?
Well, my experience is, Claire, that I've actually been out there and visited a lot of coastal communities like Hull, Grimsby, Lowestoft, Great Yarmouth, Hastings, Plymouth, very many coastal communities, and without a shadow of a doubt, they are deprived. That is it. They are deprived, and what they're crying out for are jobs. Because when someone has a job, they have a purpose, you then start to eliminate so many things like loneliness, which can bring on drug abuse and alcoholism. So they're desperate. They're desperate for work. They're desperate to earn a few quid, and the way that that can happen once we leave the EU is bringing back their natural industry, which in coastal communities is fishing. So what's happened? That's been ripped out. So the heart of their community has been ripped out. Families of parents have lost children who've had to move to other towns and cities to make a living. So I think the wonderful thing about leaving the EU is obviously bringing back industries that will be suited, or which actually do belong on the coast, which is fishing.
And just more broadly, in terms of a kind of regeneration agenda, Matthew, what do you think the prospects are? I mean, jobs is obviously what we all want, but it's not as though the EU have stolen jobs. They have in terms of fisheries, but that's not only the answer in say, somewhere like, like Stockport or...
So I mean, like June, I know kind of coastal communities pretty well. I live practically in a coastal community myself, and I think what we've seen is a real historic decline, really, since actually the end of the Second World War, in terms of what coastal communities stood for. Fishing is clearly part of that. But I think there's a lot that goes on dry land now. A lot of people living in coastal communities. So it's the decline of the high street. It's the decline in terms of kind of other traditional areas where people work. Certainly the decline in kind of tourism and things like that on one hand. And then on the other hand, you have major cities, London being a great example, where boroughs are exporting people to coastal communities as part of their social programme.
Right.
And that has been a real challenge too. So lots of coastal communities become a kind of dumping ground. So I think probably two things need to happen straight away. The first is actually, I think whilst recognising the problem, I think we need to change the language of coastal communities and stop thinking about them in a negative way and start to give them some sense of vision of purpose and being positive. Actually, there are many wonderful things about coastal communities and the people who live there, and real strengths to build on. So the language needs to change. And the second thing that needs to happen is that I think there really does need to be a very dedicated investment case and regeneration case built around certain communities with real focus.
I mean, I think this is really interesting, because one of the things that happened during the election was that everybody wanted to talk about the Northern Heartlands. The Red Wall collapsing means that, of course, many working class people who would traditionally vote Labour would vote for the Tories, and everybody's talking about ex-miners, and that's good. I mean, I want that to happen. But actually, if it wasn't for you two, I probably wouldn't have really thought about coastal communities. So I think that it's not, changing the language and the vision, but actually making it an issue. I think that's a very important
And this
point.
is not a uniquely British situation. I mean, actually, to be fair to the EU has recognised for a long time that coastal communities across the whole of the continent are really, really, really struggling. Again, not least because, as June says, 50% of the coastal community is water. It's not so. Yeah, and we're an island,
We're an
so
island.
we feel it particularly.
Yeah.
But one of the things I remember, which when I was younger, was really impressed by. I was really impressed by what happened in places like Toxteth. You know, and I've seen, working with the Mayor's Fund for London and things, what's happened in places like Stratford with the Olympics, regeneration and all those sorts of things. And I would never argue for gentrification, because I think places need to be true to their heritage and their culture. You know, we know probably better than anybody else how much people attach to those kind of things. But at the same time, this needs to be much higher up the political agenda, and it needs to be encapsulated in its own kind of special purpose vehicle.
So listen, this isn't moving away from these subjects, but it's slightly related, because I wanted to just ask you both what you've most enjoyed about being an MEP and maybe some of the lows. But actually, if I can start with you, June, because one thing that you've done here is you've really become quite a formidable figure on what's known as the PECH Committee, which is where the fishing industry is being discussed at a Europe level. Do you want to just say, you know, have you enjoyed that? How have you found it?
Yes, I have enjoyed the PECH Committee, because obviously I've been working with other countries. And what I would say about that committee is a lot of them don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand the industry. They're there, but, you know, they don't seem to know that much. So because I work in the industry and I work with fishermen and coastal communities, I can tell them lots of different stories and things that are going on, like pulse fishing, super trawlers. And sometimes I look at them and I think, well, you don't even know about these things. So I really have enjoyed the PECH Committee.
But you've done more than that. I mean, you have put 40,000 volts up the backside of that committee in terms of this really massive issue, which is going to really form a big piece of the transition period in the negotiation, which is what is going to happen to our fishing. And there is a serious number of people here who want to keep their hands on British fishing waters and things like that. It's going to be a real battle royal.
That will be a big battle.
And you are the person
and I hope you're going to. I mean, obviously, one of the things is that we won't be MEPs in a week and a half, but I know that in our different ways, we're all going to still try and maintain the discussion, make sure that the...
Well, we have to, Claire, because obviously we have this transitional period, which will be 11 months, where we won't have anybody keeping an eye on things, hence electric pulse fishing, where they could actually bring that back. We'll have no vote. I mean, we haven't got a voice here. I mean, that's why we want to leave. But you can hear things and you can make a noise. And that's what I've done. I mean, I've made a lot of noise. So I have enjoyed PECH. I've enjoyed having a platform for fishing because obviously my leader, Nigel, actually gave me a platform and no one realised just how important that was.
So one of the downsides has been, and I know that, you know, you yesterday or the day before made the point that, you know, you're concerned that in the period that we have, that there won't be representation. Of course, social media being what it is, a certain brand of nasty Remainer, and by the way, the majority of people who voted Remain are not nasty like that, but social media amplifies certain things. Trying to say that you were saying, oh, you know, well, why are you leaving then if you want a voice? But actually, we have to leave. But the point I think I wanted to get to was, it's not all been highs, is it? Because even though I think you've done a fantastic job, there are people who are ready to snipe, and you've been at the receiving end of that.
Yes, I have, and I'm not an MP. You know, I sell fish for a living, so I have been lonely at times, and I've had to pull myself together. I've had some really good advice from a woman called Claire Fox, and Anne Whitcomb has given me advice, and Matthew. The team, I mean the Brexit Party team, without you guys I couldn't. I don't think I'd have made it. And I've grown, and so I've enjoyed being able to represent coastal communities and represent the country I love. And now I want to just see it all sort of pan out.
And I hope that we're going to hear a lot more from you, even if you're not an MEP.
Thank you.
In the UK, but also I hope that you'll get some international and European press coverage even after we leave, because as you say, you've got a lot in terms of your advice, your insight, your particular experience.
And we need to work with
Of
Europe.
course,
I
we're not
want to work
anti-European.
with fishermen in France and in Holland. Of course we do.
Of course.
And we want to. They are my friends and your friends.
So-
and I'll continue.
Yeah. And therefore, if I could just ask you, just on what you've enjoyed, what you've got most out of, and also any lows.
So I have actually just really enjoyed being in this place with such a diverse and intelligent and passionate group of people. Not everybody I agree with, certainly not everybody who agrees with me, but it has been the most kind of extraordinary 7 months as a journey and being part of the unfolding story that is Brexit. I've in a different way to you, I have no experience in the area I'm going to talk about now, but I have really found it interesting to be on things like the delegation for Iran. Not something I'd really thought about before, but again, being here, having the time, allows you to really get under the surface of some of that. The thing that two things that have kind of depressed me, not depressed me, but they kind of got me down though. The first is this is just an unbelievably hypocritical place, but people somehow don't seem to see that. I mean, the best example for me is, everybody here is screaming climate emergency and redefining economies and all that sort of thing, but utterly fails to realise and do anything about the fact that once a month, the whole circus, everything anybody can see in this behind us is packed up into boxes, driven 250 kilometres down the road to Strasbourg, where there is a mirror image of this building with empty offices and all that sort of stuff for us to move into. And it's polluting and it's pumping carbon emissions into the atmosphere. And if it was an emergency, you'd do something about that.
Yes.
But oh no, we can't do that. And there's a kind of... It's so difficult to get people through that. But so, there's more work to be done.
Yeah, I think there's an undue defensiveness, actually.
Yeah.
I think that this is not unique to the European Parliament, but it does need to become much more self-critical. It needs to be able to reflect upon itself, and I think there's many really good MEPs here who I don't agree with them that they should be in the EU. I think it's an anti-democratic institution for the peoples of Italy, Poland, France, Germany, and so on. But if you're going to stay, then at least turn it into something that will have proper arguments and discussions.
So I think there is a kind of cultural... I mean, one of the things for me being here, I've never thought this beforehand, but I do think there is a sort of a cultural disconnect between the kind of British heritage, political history, the kind of slightly adversarial politics that we have and the way we debate and things, and the way that the European model and kind of proportional representation and things like that. So I think those two kind of collide here slightly. I think they're as frustrated with us asking those kind of questions, and they say, it's fine, it'll be fine.
Although it has to be said that the majority of British MEPs from other parties seem to fit in rather well with the whole thing, so it just depends. But just finally, one of the things that I've most enjoyed about being here is actually because it's been such a large group of us, getting to know the Brexit Party MEPs, because we didn't know each other. It wasn't a party only formed in order to ensure that we left the EU. And so we were literally thrown together. And in the absence of kind of more substantial political discussions that I've been frustrated haven't happened in some of the committees I'm in, where I just get so bored of the bureaucratic round and rounds, I've actually had some of the best political discussions I've ever had with you lot. And in some ways we've forged an unlikely but very successful, I think, way of discussing and disagreeing with each other. We don't all agree, but it's been in a spirit of camaraderie, I think. Don't you think?
I don't think anyone really has realised how unique the Brexit Party is. I think what Nigel Farage done was so clever. He picked these different people and put us all together, and what a party. I mean, how much did you know about fish, Claire?
Nothing. I ate it occasionally. Now I'm obsessed with fishing and coastal communities.
Me too.
I don't think we should be too self-congratulatory about it. I think that is dangerous. But I think there are some things which are true. One which is we're definitely united in our diversity.
Yes.
Both politically, in terms of our kind of backgrounds, in terms of our kind of work. That's the first thing. The second thing is I think there's a really high proportion of us who had never really been politicians before and came out of what people call proper jobs. your business is in fishing, I come from the charity sector, you run really interesting thought-provoking, thought leadership activities. So that makes us different as well. The third thing is we're the biggest party in this place, and I think that gives us a real strength. And I think we've really bonded through adversity. I think the question will be what happens next, because I think, you know, for the last, 20 years, the UK's relationship with this place has been very adversarial. But now we're leaving, once we're out, actually I think we're going to have to become really good friends with the EU, because they're going to be a really important ally and trading partner.
I think that's
and
true.
Again, our way of doing things is going to need to do that. We'll be better friends out of the EU than maybe we were in.
Listen, I hope that's given you a taster, and you were just saying what's next. One thing that's next is that myself and Henrik, the two North West MEPs, are organising, as our kind of finale contribution, a conference called What Next? Change Politics for Good. And it's a conference at which I'm delighted both June Mummery and Matthew Patton will be speaking actually on local issues, on coastal communities, on regeneration. It's a full-day conference on the 29th of February in Stockport at Edgeley Park. You can find out more information at Claire Fox MEP. What's my website called? But anyway, if you Google it, you'll find it, or email me. And I'm really hoping that these kind of political conversations, the productive side, will carry on. Matthew's absolutely right. I don't think any of us are kind of self-congratulatory, but we are proud of what we've achieved. But we know that this is the end of the beginning.
Yes.
We've now got a big job ahead in terms of UK politics, UK communities, and I hope that we are people that can contribute positively to that.
Great opportunity.
Exactly, and hopefully our conference will just give a taster at the end of February for anyone who wants to change politics for good. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks, June and Matthew.
Thanks, Claire.